Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's edition to the Canadian Tree Fund webinar, which aims to bring relevant topics in arboriculture and urban forestry to Canadian arborists. Today's presentation is Small Town Urban Forestry Challenges. Why should we care? Our presenter today is Toso Bozic. Toso is a founder of ATTS Group Incorporated and Yard Whispers Consultancy, business with 26 years experience in every aspect of trees and forestry. Toso graduated from the University of Belgrade and holds a degree in forestry engineering. He's also a member of Professional Agrologists, an ISA certified arborist, and holds the ISA Tree Risk Assessment qualification. Toso has extensive communication experience with over 2,700 public speaking events, multiple TV and radio interviews, and is also an author of over 300 articles, guides, fact sheets, and technical materials. The Canadian Tree Fund extends a big thank you to Toso for joining us here today, and we'll turn it over to you, Toso, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you to Canadian Tree Fund. And as I said to Bridget, most of the time I attend to the USA Tree Fund, and I actually support. And I will, guys, send you money after this presentation today.
Thank you.
I would encourage everybody to join. But as I said, I support the US Tree Fund, and I didn't support Canadian. I will do it today. Okay, today it's a small town urban forestry challenge. Why should we care? I'll try to go next slide, and for whatever reasons. Okay. Just quickly about my company, 2 seconds. I've been working with the government of Alberta for almost 20 years, and now I have my own consulting company. I have a range of the services to the various industries, and people who know me well, trees are truly my passion. I choose this logo on the left is dealing with the trees is dealing with generation, and whatever we do today, our generation will be thankful or not in some aspects when it comes to the trees. Service is from arborist. I'm not a tree removal company or typical arborist company. I'm a consultant. I'm probably one of the few foraging tree experts, because I probably get around 1,000 emails and phone calls about the problem with the trees. I do provide the town tree services, and from inventory to urban forest management plan. Okay, now go to the topic. This is a division, of course, in Canada, and we have around probably 16 to 19% of the Canadians live in rural area. In Alberta, we have 107 towns, and we classify a town here anything bigger than 1,000 and less than 10,000. Over 10,000 is we classify as cities. I think we have 19 cities in Alberta, and probably this is a very similar trend all across Canada, as the majority of the Canadians, I think 84% of the Canadians live in urban areas. And I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, world population crossed the line of 50% of the world population live in urban area, and 40 something is in rural area. So the demographic is changing, and everything is changing, and there's a lot of consequences between the urban and rural areas. And even in urban forestry, all the time when we talk about urban forest, we think about big cities. We are really forgetting small towns that are 8,000 to 10,000 people, and they provide a lots of values to the people of Canada in that sense. So now the trigger for this presentation, I could have given many other different topics to you folks, is this all of the news that you see it. Pine beetles, unfortunately, here in Alberta is moving eastwards, going to you guys in the east. Town of Leeton in BC was destroyed. We have a flooding in 2013 in small town just south of Calgary, High River. Of course, we have our first large fire in Slave Lake. Again, it's a small town. All of those are small towns between 500 and less than 10,000 people. Then we have a flooding in Quebec, and I can go on and on. Invasive species are spreading, marching from east to west, from west to east, from south to north. And if you look at the media, you're gonna noticing lots of media attention in the case of especially big forest fires. when I said to Bridget, most of those forest fires happen in the small towns. Most of the outbreak of insects and diseases and damages are ravaging smaller towns and rural areas, and that's why I get lots of media attention. And the people don't, wondering why, what's happening there, that we have a catastrophic fires, that loss of lives in the United States, town of Paradise Hills. In Canada, we are really fortunate. We here in Alberta, we had a Fort McMurray fire, no loss of life. We have a Slave Lake fire. We have a lots of natural disaster, and all of them happen in the small towns, except the Fort McMurray. But it's really that's get a lot of media attention, and many people in the urban area wondering why, what's going on in small town across Canada. And again, if you look even from your area, whatever you are, you're gonna see the smoke from the fire affecting city of Toronto, Edmonton. And again, people are evacuating from small towns because of the fires and natural disaster in that sense. So I want to give you folks, I don't know where across Canada, history of the trees and prairies. This is Regina, our sister province in Prairie from Alberta. And this is a legislature building 905. As you can see behind, there is no single trees over there. It was a typical prairie. And all of the trees in city of Regina that you have right now, see on the right side, it's around the 500,000 trees are planted. It was maybe a few trees along the river valleys, and but the rest of the trees are planted. So millions and millions of trees across the prairies and prairie towns and cities were planted. My city of Edmonton almost is no different. We have a river valley, and that's most likely we have a more natural trees. City of Lethbridge, city of Calgary, Moose Jaw, I can go on and on. All of the trees in the prairies are planted. And that's why we have so much diversity of some of the tree species that shouldn't be here at all, but we have them. And again, keep in mind that the millions of people planted those trees, millions of people take care of those trees, either in the big city or a small town. People do love the trees and really appreciate the trees in their community one way or another. Now, on other hand, we have this is a city of Fort McMurray, and this picture is on the left, 905, city of Fort McMurray, which is now 100,000 people. What across the Canada, we also build or carve out a huge chunk of forest and build our urban area, cities and small towns, and there is no difference. When you go back in city of Montreal, Toronto, they were in the forested land, and we built all of those city, clear the forest and build the cities. So we have those two situations here in the prairies, that trees are planted and naturally were not there. It was a prairie grass. And on the other hand, we have a trees that the urban area and towns built inside of the cities. Each of them have a different dynamic, but each of them, and especially come to the rural small towns, they have same problems. And some of those problems are just across the board. Doesn't matter if trees are planted or the small towns are built inside of the large forested area. So here is one of the things I want to mention to many of you guys. This is a small research station, a Mackenzie research station in Fort McMillan. This is a Northwest Territory border. This is a 60th parallel. This is where is the Yellowknife, okay? And way down is Edmonton. So far north, I think this is a 59 parallel. We have American elm, we have a green ash, we have a Japanese tree lilac, we have a Scots pine, we have a linden, we have an Ohio buckeye further over there. There's so many species, tree species that really historically never been there. They were planted and they're doing very well. This is site on the corner, right corner is trees were planted in 1927 and all the way up north. Matter of fact, actually, first wheat sold from Western Canada in Chicago was in 1905 from this area. This is a very fertile area along the Athabasca River, and very good soil. But when you look from this perspective, we are just almost to the 60th parallel. And you have those species growing and doing well for decades. And some of them actually now turning 100 years old. And they are still doing very well. They're still healthy. They're still growing, even after all of the harsh condition that we experience. Now, to give you other perspective, this is the first town, it's called Fort Vermilion. There's a second town, it's called Peace River. It is just maybe an hour, 2 hour different. It's 4 hours from the Northwest Territory. Again, this is where is Yellowknife. If you look to draw the parallel, we are in the middle of the Hudson Bay for rest of the Canada. This is where you guys are east. This is where you decide on the election before even I go to vote in that. So when you look how far north, we have this bur oak that is now 93 years old. We have elm trees, we have maples. Silver maple is actually growing in this area. We have linden trees that growing in this area, all range of the ash growing in this area. And this is sometimes that people don't know that. And all of this area is rural area. All those are small towns. And again, this is a prairie, typical prairie. 100-something years ago, there were prairie grass and millions of buffaloes. There was no trees in city of Regina or Lethbridge or something like that. So all of them are planted. And then we build a forest, build the urban centers into the forest area. This is where is the Jasper in that sense. So to give you that perspective that the trees are growing in the area that we never expected to be there, and most likely to the climate change even further north, we are going to see that some of the species from the way south growing in this area. And that's a very important from several reasons, either from the genetic biodiversity and also the indicators on the climate change, which I'm going to a little bit talk about that. This is a typical small town trees in Alberta, usually dominated by the elm and ash, green ash, American elm. We have a lot of Siberian elm. Manitoba maple is the other species, and then we have a typical coniferous spruce pine, few of the different species. Most of those trees, many of them are planted after the First World War. After people came from the war, they planted, they established a small town, government gave the housing, and many of those trees are 100 years old or well over 100 years of age, doing very well. Even with all of the harsh weather conditions. Don't forget, guys, we have in 1930s, the drought struck prairie provinces, huge amount of temperature changes in that. 1940s was cold and very miserable time in the prairies. Lots of moisture, lots of cold that we couldn't have some of the crops here in the prairies. Even the last 20 years, we had a significant drought that hit the prairies. 1992, 95, 97, wet years 1911, 1912, and now with last year is also drought start popping up as well. So those trees survived a lot, and they're doing okay. They're doing fine. In some actually, most of the small towns are doing exceptionally very well, considering the things what they were exposed, and most likely also very neglect. Generally speaking, there was no resources for the people to take care of those trees. Most of the trees in rural Alberta are really in good shape, in good condition, but again, as they're aging, they're creating some of the problems to the small towns. What are the characteristics of those trees? Again, settlers came and planted those trees. Generally speaking, low tree diversity is dominated by the ash, maples, elms, and spruce and pine. So that those are probably 5 species contribute 85%. There is still 15% of the many other tree species that is growing in that area. But also I looked at the city of Edmonton. Those are 5 species are city of Edmonton, and I can go city of Regina and many other probably places. Even east, you're dominated by the 5 major species in the local area. One of the danger of the little bit small town trees is you have so many small towns that is just ash tree. 80% of the boulevard trees are just ash trees or just elm trees. There is not even mixture of the ash and elm. It's just one ash or elm or or Manitoba maple or spruce or whatever it is. So that's one of the things in small towns. It's dangerous to have. If we got some of the pest, many of the trees could be wiped out, and those towns would not have any resources to remove or let alone transplant. I just want to also mention one of the last year I got hired by the funding from Alberta Real Estate Foundation, and they gave me money to do the promotion and education of the people in the small town and summer villages about the importance of the trees. And it's them to recognize the impact of the forest and tree declining in small town from the real estate point of view. And it's the value of the trees that provide to the real estate. So again, that was also one of the triggers that I visit so many small towns in Alberta, just to look what they have and promote the trees. On natural forest, mostly vintage forest, because the forest originated by the fire. So we have a 80 or 100 years old spruce pine or aspen, black poplar, and it's even age forest. And many of them are mature or over mature, and it's a process of the forest succession transition. And that's one of the why we have a forest fires. Is that it's a time for those trees to be naturally regenerated, because mostly forest fires the process. But we suppress the forest fires, and they are now like a ticking bomb of the where the next forest fire is going to be, because we have so much over mature forest, and many of them are small towns. Even the small towns that were built in the prairies, they have a small ravines of the spruce and pine that they will eventually burn. There is some invasive shrubs like a carogana that was introduced way back in the prairies to control the erosion, and now they're creeping out in our riparian area and creating the wreck in that sense. So there is some of the negative parts of course introducing the non-native tree species. In my experience in traveling across Alberta, I was amazed how much those trees are still in good shape and how resilient they are. But you start noticing the impact of the climate change. And actually more impact on climate change is some of the tree species planted the last 20, 30 years. And we took them from, usually in Alberta, we are in zone 2, 3, 3B, or a cold hardiness zone. But we got some of the species in from zone 4, and as the winter and climate is changing, you're going to see the higher mortality of some of the tree species that are introduced here in Alberta in small towns. So the species that planted early in 40s and 50s and 20s, they are still there. They are very resilient. Tree species planted later on in 90s, they are declining much faster than the older tree species. Here is the challenges, and now you can say those are same challenges in the large cities, which yes and no. I think that I did the first tree inventory of the small town ever in Alberta last year. Lack of tree care in those smaller small towns. You don't have an arborist, you don't have an urban forester, you don't have anybody even remotely having the knowledge about trees, and the tree care is to total neglect in many ways. One of the biggest problem I find as a proper tree planting, that we as an arborist or a forester, we really need to provide education how to properly plant the trees to many folks in small towns. Lack of resources. I have a situation in a small town that the closest arbor is 250 kilometers away. Let alone any urban forest or forest that can provide services to them. So knowledge and expertise is a huge challenge for many of them. Lack of provincial federal government support programs, and I'm going to talk about that. Lack of policy and bylaws. If you go to small towns and ask about tree bylaw, none, doesn't exist. Not even mention the municipal development plan, let alone policy and bylaws or something like that. And I have a situation when I ask people, okay, what do you do if somebody vandalizes a tree, cut your tree? Well, nothing. We just replace it, and there is no any bylaws, any regulatory things in the small urban area. I think we have some provincial wide about Dutch elm disease that they incorporate into that, but and they try to enforce as much, and they do enforce as much as they can, but the local town bylaws and tree bylaws simply doesn't exist. And of course, natural forest became fire hazard and became liability, huge liability. What you can do, and those small towns don't have a resource, they don't have a capacity, they don't have a knowledge, they don't have anything. Somebody else that needs to come and look into the potential for the fire hazard or other natural disasters such as flooding in that sense. So how does it look on the ground? When I was visiting through my career in 20 years in Alberta and 3 years in Saskatchewan, I visit almost any town more than 500 people. This is a very typical, and again, you have trees that are growing, from 60 to 100 years old, but then you have as I call, this is a really saddens me, this photo. These elm trees are probably 85, 90 years of age, and every year local guy, I call tree guy, and I'm going to explain to you what that means, come and do the topping of those elm trees every year. So I asked them why. Well, we don't like it, and that was it. That was the end of the story. We simply don't like it. I said, well, why do you have those trees? Why don't you cut them totally to the ground and get over it if you don't like? No, I like this way. Total lack of care. In many ways, lack of proper pruning, lack of proper maintenance. This one is very interesting. And I said, so why did you do this? And they said, well, the local resident doesn't like it. They want to see the yellow canola behind. And so this is a willow. They just chop everything. And that's the very common standard practice. What is even in several towns and communities, this was done by the arborist, certified arborist. And as a private business, and I was said, did arborists mention to you this is not proper practices? They said, well, yes and no, and they continue year after year doing something like this. And in some cases, I have a lack of care with again, even an arborist totally misdiagnosed the pest and problem with the pest, and they recommended certain actions and totally, I would classify as a malpractice, to be honest. But again, that's very common in the rural area, because they don't have a nearby resources to ask for help and where to go, who is going to come. They don't have a money to bring some of the expertise to do the proper assessment and do the proper evaluation or planning or inventory or something like that. So those things doesn't exist. And that's why they rely on the local tree guy, as I always call, and that's why you get the situation like this. It's not people try to be, they simply don't know better, and it's done through the generation. That's what happened. Lack of proper tree planting. This is on the right side. I was visiting the small town and I looked at it and I said, oh, how did you plant it? Well, said Toso, below is a bentonite, which is very interesting soil type here in Alberta. And so I said, what did you do? Well, we used a jackhammer and dig the hole. And so what did you do? And dig the hole and put the trees. And he said, we did the right way, planting the 3 feet deep. As you can see, folks, how the other tree looks like. This is other town that again, this is actually several local politicians attended to the planting this actually Tatarian maple, and the proper way, it was local tree nursery company who did the proper way. When I went over there to inspect, and it was at least a foot deep, and you can see where the root collar is in that sense. So it's a very common. And this is done by the local landscaper, which is not regulated business here in Alberta. It's a volunteer, same as arborist. It's a volunteer business. It's not regulated. There's no standards whatsoever. Most of the small towns, they don't develop those standards. They don't have like a big city of Edmonton standards how to plant the trees and care the maintenance and do the check-off system where somebody do the planting. That doesn't exist in small rural Alberta. They don't have that. They simply take, okay, here's a landscaper and we're gonna plant the trees. I just inspected this summer in small town in northwest Alberta. It was, I can't remember, 50 trees planted. All 50 of them I rejected because it was totally wrong planting something like this. And so mortality on their already cash strapped resources is so high. And sometimes when I look at what is actually really surviving those in town, I shake my head. But trees are incredibly resilient in that sense. I used trees are good web video links that I sent probably 2,000, 3,000 to all my clients how to do the proper planting of the trees. Container trees, caliper trees, and small trees. Those videos are so good. And everybody replied back to me. They said to me, from now on, Toso, I know how to plant the tree. So there is a resources, and I sent pretty much all of the small towns. This is how you plant the proper trees, properly trees. So this is a very common. Again, it's a local tree guy that did this. And again, that's one of the danger in small rural area. As I said, I did the first proper inventory of this town, 1,100 people, and I used i3 Eco tools to do the inventory and provide. Also, I built a forest management plan. And the reason, actually, here is what was interesting. For the first time, it was the reason that the politician, local councillors, they're seeing this as an asset. And that was all of my talk to the local small urban municipality. Trees are asset as well as liability, but they are asset. And they said to me, Holland Ocean, they have also natural area, and the total structural values using i3 Eco was around $2.7 million. So where they come up, every year local small towns and rural municipality have to report to the government what happened to their asset, to their infrastructure like roads, sewage, water treatment plant, sport fields, arenas, everything else. They have to report is increasing or decreasing. If their asset is decreasing, they're gonna most likely get less money from the government, either provincial, federal government. So what they use this inventory, this $2.7 million tree inventory, they added to their asset. So when they're reporting to the provincial federal government, 1,100 people and how big is asset, they will get more money from the provincial federal government. And not just that, they actually apply for the TD Canada Foundation for the Community in Bloom to do the many tree planting, and they apply for the CN. They provided the money for them. So they use the inventory as a tool to obtain more money, because most of those grants and funding are tied. Do you have an inventory or not? And this is the first small town in Alberta that ever done it. We have 107 of them. So we have another 106 that we might need to go through. And again, across Canada, there is hundreds of, not thousands of small towns that never done any tree inventory. But how to convince those people is actually telling them, your trees are asset, that it will increase overall asset to your community, that you will be able to get more money from the provincial federal government. And that could be avenue for all of us to promote that, to get attention to the politician and the federal municipal government as well, and provincial government as well. Lack of resources. This is the biggest challenge so far. At least in Alberta, we can find the money. We always said money is never an issue for the good cause. People will find the money, but it's the human resources, the biggest challenge for the trees and forestry in small rural Alberta. As I said, that the tree guy, it's 100%, at least in Alberta, the tree guy is the man. We have some few horticulturalists that are female, which is wonderful. That person, tree guy, is a jack of all trade, master of none. That person in the small town is taking care of all of the roads, signage, all of the problem with water, sewage, lighting, any damages, anything goes wrong is this person. And on top of that, you're also tree guy. 95% of those people I talk, when I ask them, I say, what kind of coniferous tree species you have? Well, Christmas tree. That tells me a lot. What kind of hardwood species? What kind? You have elm? I don't know. It's a big tree. And I don't blame those people. They've never been trained. They've never been, the politicians don't support them to learn about trees. They're, as I said, they're jack of all trades. And on top of that, oh, by the way, you have to prune the tree. That tree represents the danger. Or the local guy said, I don't like the tree, take it out. Or local tree nurse said, you have to plant the trees in the park. Okay, what kind of trees? Whatever that local tree nursery might have on the surpluses, and plant all of them. And the mortality of those tree dying is pretty high. So it's really the tree guy and that could be surrounding area. And then you have a very lots of situations. It's a tree guy in the landscape company that doing all of the pruning, planting, all of the landscaping things. When you talk to them, majority of them has a very, very limited knowledge about trees. And that's why I call them all tree guy. And you have all across Alberta and probably across the Canada, those guys in rural communities that they are taking care of everything because that's their job. And they simply don't know. And I don't blame those people. They simply, after my visit, I spent a day with each of those community. They said to me, Tosha, nobody, I'm 60 years old. Nobody taught me about trees. Nobody told me anything about trees. You're the first person ever who came and taught me what's the difference between the trees, how to plant the trees, how to prune the trees, how to maintain trees. Nobody ever told me that. So again, I don't blame them, but I think also all of the arborists, we never reach those people and try to provide the help either. So that's how sometimes as a professional organization, we might look more aggressively and help those people and help those small town, the tree guy, to provide education and information. As I said, most of the towns closest arborist is 300 kilometers away. You have to rely on the tree guy because it's expensive to bring the certified arborist going over there for 6 hours driving and do the work. It's pretty expensive and impact their financial resources. In even some cases, as I said, I have a situation that is a local arborist has a very little bit knowledge. They're good in the pruning. They know how to remove the tree, but anything from that, from past tree planting, regular, they don't. They simply don't. They say, Tosha, I don't know. I don't know the difference. I know how to prune the tree, and that's where I end up. Many of some of the smaller towns, they have a horticulturalist. And now because of economic situation in Alberta and probably the rest of Canada, horticulture is the first people who get laid off. Many of them are for contract 6 months, but now financial harsh time hit many of the other towns. They are the first one to go. None of them has a job right now. As again, it's usually under the public works and transportation department, and those people are mostly engineers. They know how to build the roads and electricity, power lines, and sewage, and trees are very, very low on totem pole. Matter of fact, many of them, they say, Tosha, I hate the trees because it screw up my roads and my signage, my electricity, and all the things. They don't want to see the trees. They want to cut it down, get rid of it. And again, there is lots of room for the education on that. As I said, most of the staff, no training at all. None, zero. And I visited in total, probably 60 of the small towns, stop by, talk to them, visit their towns. They said, you're the first person ever come and talk about trees. It's just not on the radar, period. And again, last and not least, they see it as a liability. When I did the town of Torsby, it's probably first council or the small town to see as an asset. And we have to talk about that these trees are asset. There is the value that you can add to your community, not just environmental, social value, but also economic value. And many times we don't emphasize that. Lack of support of the government. Trees in small towns and rural area pretty much is, I call forgotten forest, forgotten trees. In Alberta government, we have no urban forest whatsoever. I used to work with the government of Alberta for 20 years, and many times when it comes to the urban trees, they end up, I was agroforester, for that matter of fact, or woodlot specialist, but know about urban forestry whatsoever, none. It's not on the radar of government of Alberta, especially now with latest cuts and economic situation in Alberta. For sure, it's not going to have any more urban forest, no as addition urban forest whatsoever. Here in Edmonton, Canadian Forest Service or Natural Resources Canada, no urban forest either. And I don't know, guys, across the Canada, what you may be in East. I know a friend of mine, he's in Gatineau. They're doing some on the panel. I said, well, we have some urban forest, but I said, is that the city of Ottawa, or is it some of the federal government employee that is have a file on urban forestry? We simply don't have that. They don't even talk about it. They don't mention. They might have for political reason. A last thing was 2 billion trees coming from feds, and parts of it is going to go to the urban centers. Okay, it's going to go to Edmonton, Calgary, and big cities. Anything is going to spill over in the small town. Nothing. None of them will be able to even apply for that. So there is no programs, there's no incentive, there's no training, there's nothing. And nobody want to talk about that. Research. I have a hard time to find the research until Alex show up, and University of British Columbia. I look at some of the research and some of the research on the East, but really that's all where it end up. Anybody done any research about urban forestry, and especially on the small towns in the prairie? Not that I know. City of Edmonton did some of the research on some of the area that they collect together with the University of Alberta, but that was a one project, and it was the impact of sodium on the trees. There's nothing. And yeah, I'm begging you guys, if I missed something, if you know over there that there is something, send it to me. I would love to have that. Counties in municipality, on the other hand, they have some of the stuff that provide some information knowledge, but it's a very limited knowledge about the trees. So you have a county, and with the county you have a dependent, the town, and then sometimes they provide a few knowledge, but not much. So there's really come to the government very little, or actually nothing, matter of fact. And then I go look at my American friends, which I look every time I can attend some of the webinars, and I call this Holy Trinity. Federal government has a clear, Federal Forestry Department has a clear direction on the research and development when it comes to urban forestry. State government has a clear direction what to do with urban forestry. Every university almost has urban forestry on the file, and that's equals municipality as a benefits. And I said, every time when I look at US tree fund, and then look at where the funding coming from, who those people are, and that's why I call it this Holy Trinity. I don't know if we have American on this webinar or not, but you guys are lucky. We in Canada, we have I have, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, but we have nothing like this. There is no way I would be able to see Canadian Forest Service working with the provincial government on anything on the urban forest. Nothing. We simply don't have that. And that whole system, that's why I like in the States. It's a very solid system. Again, urban state forestry program, they said to provide the financial, technical, education related assistance to the state foresters to assist the community to plan urban forestry programs. Can anybody find me something like this in Canada? Anywhere. They have a Davy Research, they have a Morton Arboretum Research, they have plenty of other private and independent research organizations who do specifically on urban forestry. Unfortunately, we don't have anything in Canada. We have some other supports. In Alberta, Stop Dead Alberta provide really good educational information about Dutch elm disease and stop spreading Dutch elm disease, which is very important. Community in the Bloom, they got some level, and they try to look into the trees, but majority of them, they don't put the trees on the radar. Mostly it's the flowers and other stuff that community blue does. Our local ISA Prairie chapter, they do have our information. Unfortunately, this year we don't have a conference, which we would love to, but they provide the same information to the local horticulturalists. Tree nursery groups, they have educational information that provide some support to the small towns. Olds College, we have a college that is doing the arboriculture program, and they're training the arborists and people working that section. They try as much as possible to provide information to the public as well, beside the educational side of it. And again, there is a lots of small, I call tree caring, inspiring individuals to provide education and promotion of the trees. I myself, every time when I write a blog, I have a list of all of the towns. Any relevant information I send to them. I provide them as much as possible information to all of the small town CEOs and or public works director, that they will have it. Sometimes I'm annoying. They probably are fed up with me, but at least they got information what is relevant. Majority of them, they appreciate the information when I send to them. Natural hazards, that is most likely forest fire in small towns. We have a lots of small towns. They have this is natural forest, and this is the town of Torsby and the other town. They are within a small town. They are natural areas. They are parts of the town for mostly for the campgrounds, recreational, wildlife habitat protection area, protection of the water bodies and everything. So every town pretty much has something like this. And what happened, this is a fire on the left in the Slave Lake forest fire that's happening. And from now on, Alberta has actually very good fire smart program and provide the grants for those small towns. They would be able to do the fire smart. And it was in the past, it was usually towns that are close to the big forest zone. Now they're expanding. They're looking at each individual town, and even though this one is really middle of the prairie, but there is a potential that can go in the smoke, and there is a potential that can be create lots of damage to small towns. And there is, again, the good thing is the fire smart program in Alberta really provide a good incentives for the local towns to enter into the fire smart, which is good. That is really really good here in Alberta. Why should we care? Spread of invasive pests. Pictures on the right is again, this is a mountain pine beetle in that small town Torsby that I did, which is less than an hour from Edmonton. We have a mountain pine beetle east of Edmonton. It's marching in, and goes to the local farm or local towns and marching east. You guys from the east, we have in Winnipeg, Emerald Ash border, and going toward to the west, and we have a Dutch elm disease that we in Alberta we are containing spread from the Saskatchewan, which is next neighbor province or United States, Montana in that matter. And those are things. When I was doing the assessment of the how many ash tree we have in Alberta, well, some of the big urban areas said they put the numbers. Then I said, by the way, do you know we almost planted 1.5 million ash tree during the shelterable program in Alberta alone? And I said, let's figure out that 50% of those trees are dead. We still have a 700,000 planted ash tree in rural Alberta in the small communities and farms. And this insect can easily come to them and establish and be established here in Alberta. But we don't have an infrastructure to do any surveillance and monitoring whatsoever. None. We might, if it come to Edmonton, we have a staff in Edmonton. If it come to Calgary, we have a staff in Calgary. We have a Red Deer, fine. But on the border in Saskatchewan, we have none. Small town, none. No surveillance and monitoring. Same thing, you guys, with the Bounty Pine Beetle moving east. It's going to go most likely to the boreal forest, but it's also going to go to the prairie small towns and probably reach Winnipeg and again further east. So we forget that there is that avenue for the insect to come and be very destructive. And that avenue is to the small towns or farms that they come to our area. Protect the genetic diversity. Right, this picture of the city of Edmonton. And again, they have ash, spruce, pine, elm, and poplar. But said that, all across the small towns, you have a pretty similar structure as like this. The difference is the elm trees 1 hour away from the Northwest Territory might be a little bit different than elm trees in Edmonton, and definitely will be a different than elm tree in city of Lethbridge, which is on the Montana border. So even though it's the same species, but the environment where they grow up and how they survive are totally different. And that's what we have to look, especially in the climate change. And again, lots of nursery people are looking into that and say, hey, hold on, we have to get the seeds from the area where it was, let's say, all the way close to the Northwest Territory. Climate change is no doubt, small towns and are really on the front line on that. And again, a good example is forest fire. Everybody is talking about climate change because of using the forest fires in small towns. Coast is a humongous. And I always said that the small towns and forests and trees are really canary in the coal mine. What is going to happen with the climate change? And where, how far, how wide its impact of the climate change. And I can see some of the tree species really expanding further north that never been before and doing okay, doing very well, matter of fact, in some aspects. And I can see that some of the trees that used to be okay in south parts of Alberta are not doing anymore very well. Mortality is pretty high. So that all of those small towns, because the sheer geographical distribution can tell us what is really the impact of the climate change. And as I said, you know, the impact of the losing the trees in the fire is an impact in the water, and impact the biodiversity, impact in the transportation, and on and on. Economic impact. This is done by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Insurance Bureau of Canada. And they simply say municipal level cost around the $5.3 billion. This was, I think, 2017. And it's investment. Good example is a High River fire. I was night before that flooding, and I asked people why they don't have a more big cottonwood trees along the Sheep River. Oh, Toso, it's fine, and they're dying. And I said, why don't you replace it? And I even asked question why it's called High River, and they explained to me because it's flood. I left the town by 6 o'clock. By midnight and 1 o'clock, rain start. By 10 o'clock, town was flooded. And town was flooded in the area when the tree were removed, because the river bank couldn't hold anymore and create a glitch in the small bridge, and that's where the town was flooded. Millions of dollars. We have a city of Calgary flooding again. Anywhere where you have a trees, you have that ability to channel the water. When you don't have a trees, it goes break down and do the flooding. How much? Also wanted to give a talk 6 months ago to the prairie tree nursery production and impact of the climate change to the tree nursery, because all of those trees in the small urban area are coming from the nursery, generally speaking. And I propose this question to them and challenge to them. You guys are going to supply the trees of the future for the urban cities and small towns. What is the tree species selection? What can survive or not? Invasive is you try to put a new species, the pest will follow. How much drought? An increase of the drought to produce those trees. Hails, carbon tax is a huge cost in some of them. Soil degradation, use the fertilizer. More regulatory pressure. So even the core of the supply of the nursery, they are facing the challenges of the climate change. They have to look and say, to produce the tree that has been used in urban and small town settings, this is what we are facing. And the public can say, you're not sustainable anymore. Well, what it means to them, how are they going to make the tree that be sustainable? This is what, again, go back to my American friends. I love it. They did a map and USA Tree Atlas. And they basically said, okay, this is where's the now current forest inventory of the black ash. This is where we are predicting the black ash is going to spread. So from here to here. And I can tell you here in the prairies, we've seen some of the trees are moving that shouldn't be here at all. We see that some of the trees are further moving north and disappearing natural forest that never been before. So Do we have any idea how our Canadian tree species is going to move over the period of time as a result of the climate change? I have no idea if anybody talk about that. In that nutshell, we truly have a little understanding about importance of trees in small towns. We really, when you ask the people, many of us, whoever is on this call, is not even on the radar, not want to even talk about it. All of the small towns have a limited resources. The biggest challenge is the human resources. People simply don't have a human resources to implement things and manage the trees. The small town trees are first experience of impact of climate change. You're gonna see there what is happening, mortality, dieback, or new trees are growing and surviving. So those are the, it's a big geographical distribution. I always said Alberta is 1,700 kilometers big in the length. And, when you have from all the way up north to all the way to the south is huge. You can see the changes as a result of the climate change. Again, what is forgetting, and that's why in the news and media, the impact of natural disasters mostly happen in small towns. And if you dig deeper, you're going to see that one of the causes of an impact of natural disasters is, have you managed the forest, have you managed the trees or not, including the forest fire, including the flooding, and including in some cases ice storms. Because if you manage your trees in a small town, they should not be able to fall on the power lines and create the problems. Pest spreading will most likely happen in a small town to the lack of surveillance and monitoring. If you go ask any of the small town, do you know anything? They have ever heard about Island border? None of them, and they might already have them. And again, that's what part of the truly challenge me, that the whole level of government, even corporate business, or the research, or even environmental groups, they simply don't think about small urban town forest. Like that's I call forgotten trees, forgotten forest. We don't have that. They don't think about it, and they are a huge portion of our landscape, and very important in many aspects, as I mentioned in these previous slides. So here is me. You can follow me on the blog, and if you have any questions, I'm gonna go back to Alex or whoever is over there.
Thank you so much, Toso. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to either put them in the chat or put them in the question box, and we will we'll answer them. There's Sarah's shared something with us here from Tree Canada about community tree grants to help fund the tree planting in your community. That deadline is coming up. Any other questions and chats can be added in there. A few questions for you, Toso, as we go. Looks like there's already one. If you to what degree do you think budget structures are the limit in some of these communities in terms of inventories? Do you think it's difficult to get inventory in simply because there's kind of the lack of budget?
When I talk to the people, the cost of inventory that I've done for this small town, it's really, it took me like 2 days or 3 days to do it and max, and it was really very quickly. There's because of the sheer volume, there's not enough, there's no too many trees. So the budget wise to come to the CEOs and politicians, actually it's not the issue at all. They most of the time when they see there is the value on that, and they can connect that value either from environmental, social, or economic values that they see as a result of the inventory, they will find the money. They simply say, oh, well, for that much money we are going to get this, and they can see the values. The challenge is how we present that, how do we show them. So the money to have an inventory per se is actually not as big issue. The challenge is once you do inventory, you have to hand that to the tree guy. And parts of the whole project, what I've done is also I provide education and training to their staff that they will implement what it means, how it means plant the tree, how to prune the tree, how to recognize the tree, how to what to do in the case something goes wrong. So inventory is one aspect. Training education is also extremely important part of the package for the inventory.
Do you find that a lot of the small town inventories are you inventorying trees that were kind of were placed there and planted there, and or is it more natural regeneration, like what you might see?
Both.
Both.
Both, Alex. I take a whole town. I have a natural area that was established by the last forest fire, or people planted 60, 70 years ago or something like that, and it really became natural area spread, and especially with aspen. And then you have a small boulevards and parks and typical urban street setting. So when I do the inventory, I do both. You do the individual tree inventory, or I use a plot if it's larger forest area that surround the town. So use the combination of the both. But both of the inventory I perform and provide them information on that, because again they have that natural forest and there is the value there. This is usually where the recreational trails are, where the campgrounds are, where there are lots of activities that is going on in that natural forest, which is a parts of the town as well.
Do you find that the management objectives then are typically aligned with kind of our cultural ecosystem services in terms of like recreation and aesthetics, and the regulating ones like windbreaks? Would that kind of be what would be up there in terms of importance, is those windbreaks and recreational values?
I think it's definitely recreational values are on the top. As I said, what is also the value for those doing the inventory is again concept of asset and liability. That's a very economic aspects of the trees and performing what those trees perform to the residents, to the society, is also economic values. But definitely, of course, environmental, recreational, social values are on the top probably 4 out of 5, and then there's that fifth one, which is really that economic value that say, hey, it's became an asset, it's became a liability. We would be able to do this, especially with the climate change. They now try to tie it out how much carbon credits they will be able to get. If they plant more trees, are they gonna be able to get the carbon credits or environmental goods and services provided by the various organizations and the groups? So it definitely environmental social values are the most important, but economics are right there. They don't put that aside whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. We had one question in the chat here from Mary Eve that said, where can we find the CU code for this presentation? For folks who are attending here, all CEUs will be automatically added to your account after the webinar, so no worry there.
Is that that include me, my friend? I guess.
We've concluded the questions we have in the chat here. So I want to extend a big thank you to Toso for joining us here today and presenting. And before we bid adieu to everyone, the Canadian Tree Fund invites you to consider donating to our organization to help continue funding arboriculture research and education in Canada. I'm going to go ahead and post the link in the chat. And as always, a donation of $20 or more has a tax receipt issued. The Canadian Tree Fund is a registered charitable organization established in 1995, an affiliation with the Ontario chapter of the ISA. So in tandem with ISAO, the Canadian Tree Fund helps to fund arboriculture research in Canada. And by donating today, you're helping to grow the arboriculture industry of tomorrow. So we want to thank you for your support, and thanks for tuning in. Thanks again to Toso for presenting, and have a good day.
Thank you so much, I'm donating right now. Thank you guys, appreciate this. Okay, bye.
Thanks folks, have a good day.
Bye. You too, bye.